The last thing I remember before my face hit my mother-in-law's dining room floor was the sound of my 8-year-old son screaming into a phone. His voice cracked and broke as he begged a stranger to send help. "My daddy's dying! Please, you have to help him! My daddy's dying!" That sound will haunt me for the rest of my life. Not because of the fear in it, but because of what I didn't know yet. I didn't know that the woman rushing to my side, cradling my head, stroking my hair, was the reason I was on that floor. I didn't know that the sports drinks she mixed for me every morning were killing me one sip at a time. I didn't know that the electrolyte powder she pressed into my hands with such tender care was laced with antifreeze. My name is Preston Kellard. Most people on the job sites call me Press. I'm 38 years old, and for 15 years, I've worked construction in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The last 3 of those years, I've served as foreman for Lone Star Commercial, managing a crew of 20 guys building office complexes and retail centers across the Metroplex. I've pulled men from collapsed scaffolding when safety protocols failed. I've performed first aid on workers in parking lots after heat exhaustion knocked them flat on 100-degree Texas afternoons. I've held injured men in my arms and promised them everything would be okay, even when I knew they might not walk again. I thought I understood danger. I thought I could see it coming from a mile away, like spotting a crane malfunction or catching structural weakness before it became catastrophic. But I never saw the danger sitting across from me at my own kitchen table every morning. I never suspected the woman I'd loved for 11 years. I never imagined that the mother of my son was counting down the days until I stopped breathing. Her name is Ashley. We met at a company barbecue 12 years ago when she was selling houses to some of the contractors I worked with. Back then, she specialized in working-class neighborhoods, helping guys like me get into their first homes. She laughed at my terrible jokes about concrete and rebar. She remembered that I liked my coffee black after hearing it once. She looked at me like I was something special, and at the time, I believed her. At the time, I thought she saw the same thing I saw when I looked in the mirror after a good day on the job site. A man building something lasting, something that mattered. We got married a year later in a small ceremony at her parents' church in Arlington. When our son Cody was born 2 years after that, I thought my life was complete. I had a career I was proud of, a wife who seemed to adore me, and a little boy with my eyes and his mother's smile. What I didn't have was any idea that I was living with someone who was slowly erasing me from existence. It started about 7 months before that Christmas dinner. I began feeling tired in a way I'd never experienced, not the normal exhaustion that comes from pouring concrete in brutal Texas heat or working double shifts to meet a deadline. This was different. This was a heaviness in my bones that sleep couldn't touch. I'd wake up after 8 hours feeling like I hadn't rested at all. Then came the nausea. It would hit me without warning, sometimes on the job site right in front of my crew, sometimes in the middle of the night. I'd rush to the bathroom and heave until there was nothing left. I lost 18 pounds in 5 months. My work shirts hung loose on my frame. My face looked hollow when I caught my reflection in the truck mirror. My hands started trembling so badly that I had to hide them from my crew because I didn't want them to lose confidence in me. A foreman with shaky hands is a liability on a construction site. I went to doctors, lots of them, and Ashley was right there beside me at every single appointment. She took notes in her neat handwriting. She asked intelligent questions about my symptoms and treatment options. She managed my medications and scheduled my follow-ups like she was running a construction project herself. She made sure I drank her special sports drink powder every morning because she said it would help replace the electrolytes I lost, sweating in the Texas sun. She mixed protein shakes every evening and sat beside me while I drank them, rubbing my shoulders and telling me everything would be okay. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted wife. My crew said it constantly. Even my doctors said it. "Mr. Kellard, your wife is taking such good care of you. A lot of patients don't have that kind of support." I believed them. I believed her. I had no reason not to. My son Cody is 8 years old. He's in 2nd grade and he thinks his dad is a superhero. He tells his friends at school that I build skyscrapers for a living, which isn't too far from the truth. We mostly do commercial buildings, office complexes, retail centers, the kind of structures that define a city's skyline. He's sensitive and sweet and notices things most kids his age would miss. He noticed that I was getting thinner. He noticed that I didn't toss the football with him as much anymore. He asked me once with those big worried eyes, "Daddy, are you going to be okay?" I told him yes. I told him Daddy was just a little tired, and the doctors were going to fix it. I promised him I'd be around to teach him everything I knew about building things, about working with your hands, about being a man who keeps his word. I had no idea that the only reason I was sick was because the woman making my meals wanted me dead. On Christmas Eve, Ashley's family gathered at her parents' house like we did every year. Her mother, Brenda, spent 3 days preparing her famous honey-glazed ham with all the trimmings. Her father, Walt, set up the decorations he'd been using since Ashley was a kid. Her younger brother, Danny, drove in from Austin to be there, bringing his new girlfriend, who seemed nervous about meeting the extended family. And my wife, Ashley, packed a thermos of her special sports drink and told me to finish all of it before dinner. She kissed my cheek and smiled at me, with those warm brown eyes I'd fallen in love with so many years ago. "You need your strength, honey," she said. "Drink up." I did what she asked. I always did what she asked. 20 minutes later, I was unconscious on her mother's dining room floor with blood running down my forehead, and my son screaming for someone to save me. But this story isn't just about the woman who tried to kill me. It's about the stranger who saved my life. A young nurse named Nicole, who leaned close to my ear in that hospital room and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Don't drink what Ashley brings." I thought she was crazy. I thought she was confused. I thought there had to be some mistake. There was no mistake. And if I hadn't listened to her, I wouldn't be alive to tell you this story. I wouldn't be here to warn other men about the dangers hiding in plain sight. To understand how I ended up on that hospital bed with poison running through my veins, you need to understand the life I thought I had. The life I was so proud of. The life that turned out to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. I became a construction worker when I was 23 years old. It wasn't something I planned. I was working at an auto parts store after dropping out of community college, going nowhere fast, when a buddy of mine suggested I apply for an apprentice position with his company. I figured I had nothing to lose. 3 months later, I was standing on my first job site with a brand new hard hat and absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. Turns out I was good at it. Really good. I loved the brotherhood. I loved building something that would last longer than I would. I loved knowing that when my shift ended, I had actually accomplished something real, something you could drive by and point to and say, "I built that." By the time I was 35, I'd made foreman. My crew respected me because I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. My boss trusted me because I brought projects in on time and under budget. I had found my purpose and I threw myself into it completely, maybe too completely. That's what Ashley always said anyway. We met at that barbecue hosted by one of the guys from the electrical crew. She was standing by the cooler in a yellow sundress, talking to some of the wives about the housing market. Back then, she was selling starter homes to working families, helping guys like me get into their first place. I walked over to grab a beer and ended up talking to her for 3 hours straight. She was smart and funny and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person at the party. When I asked for her number, she wrote it on a napkin and told me not to wait too long to call. I called her that same night. We dated for a year before I proposed. She said yes before I even finished the question. Our wedding was small, just family and close friends at her parents' church in Arlington. Ashley's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Her father shook my hand and told me I'd found a good one. Danny was my best man, and he gave a toast about how he'd never seen his sister happier. He was right. Ashley had never seemed happier. When Cody was born 2 years later, I thought my heart might actually burst. I held that tiny baby in my arms and made a silent promise that I would always protect him, always be there for him, always put him first. It's a promise I've kept every single day since. Ashley settled into the role of stay-at-home mom initially, but after a year, she got restless and decided to get her real estate license. She was good at it, really good. Within 2 years, she'd moved up from starter homes to luxury properties in Plano and Frisco. She was making more money than me by the time Cody started school. She handled million-dollar listings for wealthy clients, networking with developers and investors. She managed everything at home so I could focus on work. She packed my lunches, she handled the bills, she made sure Cody got to school on time and finished his homework. Whenever I came home exhausted after a brutal day in the Texas heat, she'd have dinner waiting and a cold beer in the fridge. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, the construction foreman and the successful real estate agent, building a life together in suburban Texas. I believed them. Hell, I was proud of the life we'd built. I thought we were a team. But then, about 7 months before that Christmas, something started to change. Not in my marriage, in my body. It began with fatigue that nothing could cure. I'd sleep for 9 hours and wake up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. I started having trouble concentrating at work. Simple tasks that I'd done 1,000 times suddenly felt overwhelming. Reading blueprints became difficult. Following safety protocols required conscious effort instead of muscle memory. Then the nausea kicked in. Random waves of sickness that would hit me in the middle of inspecting rebar or during safety meetings. I'd have to excuse myself and find somewhere private to throw up, praying my crew wouldn't lose confidence in their foreman. The weight started falling off me like I was melting from the inside out. 18 pounds in 5 months. My work shirts hung loose on my frame. My face looked hollow when I caught my reflection in the truck mirror. The guys on my crew started making jokes about me needing to eat more barbecue, but I could see the concern in their eyes. My hands developed a tremor that I tried to hide by keeping them wrapped around my coffee mug or buried in my pockets. In construction, steady hands aren't just important, they're essential. You can't operate machinery, read measurements, or handle tools properly when your hands shake like an old man's. Ashley noticed all of it, of course. She was attentive like that. She started researching my symptoms online, staying up late reading medical websites and forums. She scheduled doctor appointments and drove me to every single one, sitting in the exam room with her notebook, taking detailed notes. She asked intelligent questions about my symptoms and treatment options. She pushed for more tests when the initial results came back inconclusive. When the doctors couldn't find anything wrong, she insisted on specialists. She managed my medications like a pharmacy technician, making sure I took everything on schedule. And most importantly, she made sure I drank her special sports drink powder every morning because she said it would help replace the electrolytes I was losing in the brutal Texas heat. She mixed protein shakes every evening and sat beside me while I drank them, rubbing my shoulders and telling me everything would be okay. "We're going to figure this out," she told me one night, holding my hand while I lay on the couch, too tired to move. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted wife. My crew said it constantly. Even my doctors said it. "Mr. Kellard, your wife is taking such good care of you. A lot of patients don't have that kind of support." I believed them. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was the woman who'd stood beside me for 11 years, who'd given me a son, who'd built a successful career while still making sure our family came first. What I didn't realize was that she was controlling every single piece of information that reached my doctors. She answered questions for me when I was too exhausted to think clearly. She described my symptoms in ways that led them down the wrong paths. She made sure no one ever suspected the truth. My brother Shane called me 2 days before Christmas. He's a welder who works oil rigs in West Texas, tough as nails, and doesn't worry about much. But he sounded concerned when he heard my voice over the phone. "You sound weak, Press," he said. "Like, really weak. Are you eating enough?" I told him I was fine, just tired from work. We'd been pushing hard to finish a retail complex before the holidays, pulling long days in the cold. It was normal to be exhausted this time of year. He didn't believe me, but Shane's not the type to push. That's just how he is. He worries in silence, keeps his concerns to himself until it's too late to help. My father, Brady, was different. He pulled me aside at Ashley's parents' house on Christmas Eve and looked me dead in the eyes with the kind of stare that could cut through steel. "You look like hell, Press. I'm not joking around here. What the hell is going on with you?" I gave him the same story I'd been telling everyone. The doctors were still running tests. They were working on it. Everything would be fine once they figured out what was wrong. Brady shook his head and glanced across the room at Ashley, who was helping her mother in the kitchen. Something flickered in his expression that I couldn't quite read. Suspicion, maybe. Or just the instinctive worry of a father who'd built things with his hands his whole life and knew when something wasn't structurally sound. "Just take care of yourself, brother," he said. "Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me." I should have asked him what he meant. I should have pushed harder, demanded to know what his gut was telling him. But I didn't. I was too tired, too sick, too focused on just getting through the evening. 20 minutes later, I was unconscious on the floor. Christmas dinner at Ashley's parents' house was supposed to be a celebration. Her mother had spent 3 days preparing honey-glazed ham with all the traditional Texas sides. The table was set with her best china, the same plates she'd used every Christmas since before Ashley was born. Candles flickered in the center of the table. Cody was bouncing in his seat with excitement, sneaking looks at the pile of presents under the tree. I remember sitting down and thinking that maybe I was finally turning a corner. I'd had a decent night's sleep for once. The nausea had stayed away most of the day. Ashley had made sure I finished my sports drink that morning, watching me drain every drop with those caring eyes. She'd been extra attentive all week, rubbing my shoulders and telling me how good it was to see some color back in my cheeks. Brenda placed a plate in front of me, piled high with food: ham, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh rolls with butter. The smell alone should have made my mouth water. Instead, something felt wrong. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. Before I even picked up my fork, I took 3 bites of the ham. That's all. 3 bites. The room started to spin. Not slowly, not gradually, like when you stand up too fast. It was like someone had grabbed the world and twisted it sideways without warning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Ashley's voice sounded far away, like she was calling to me from the end of a long tunnel. "Press? Honey, are you all right? Press!" I tried to stand up. I needed air, needed to get outside, but my legs didn't work anymore. They buckled underneath me like they were made of paper instead of muscle and bone. I felt my shoulder clip the edge of the table as I went down. Then my head hit the hardwood floor, and everything went red, then black. I found out later that Cody was the first one to react. My 8-year-old son jumped out of his chair and ran to me while the adults were still frozen in shock. He shook my shoulder and screamed my name. When I didn't respond, he grabbed Brenda's phone off the counter and dialed 911. The operator who took his call said she'd never heard a child sound so terrified. His voice was shaking so hard he could barely get the words out. "My daddy fell down and he won't wake up. There's blood on his head. Please send someone. Please. Is my daddy going to die?" I wasn't conscious for any of it. I didn't see my father-in-law drop to his knees beside me or hear Ashley's mother sobbing. I didn't see Danny checking my pulse with hands that knew first aid from his volunteer firefighter training. I didn't see Ashley cradling my head in her lap, stroking my hair and whispering that help was coming. I didn't see the paramedics burst through the front door or feel them strap me to a stretcher. I only have fragments of the ambulance ride. Bright lights above me, voices shouting medical terms I didn't understand, someone squeezing my hand and telling me to stay with them. I remember trying to open my eyes and seeing Ashley's face hovering over me. She was crying. "Stay with me, baby," she whispered. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Just hold on." I thought those words were a comfort. I thought she was my anchor in the storm. I had no idea she was the storm itself. When I finally woke up fully, I was in a hospital bed surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed like the equipment on a construction site. Monitors tracked my heartbeat. An IV dripped fluid into my arm. The fluorescent lights above me were too bright, and my head throbbed where it had hit the floor. A nurse entered the room. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and calm, steady eyes that reminded me of the safety inspectors who could spot structural problems before they became disasters. Her name tag said Nicole. She checked my vitals without saying much, her movements efficient and practiced. Then she did something strange. She walked to the door and looked out into the hallway, checking both directions like she was making sure no one was watching. Then she closed the door softly and returned to my bedside. She leaned down close to my ear, so close I could smell the faint scent of hospital soap on her skin. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Kellard, I need you to listen to me very carefully. When your wife comes in, do not eat or drink anything she brings you. Nothing. Not a sip of water, not a bite of food. Do you understand?" I stared at her like she had lost her mind. "What are you talking about? My wife? I can't explain right now. I need to wait for your test results. But please, Mr. Kellard, promise me you won't consume anything she gives you." Before I could respond, she straightened up and walked out of the room like nothing had happened. I lay there in stunned silence, trying to process what she'd said. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Ashley was the most devoted wife I knew. She'd been by my side through every doctor appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of this medical nightmare. But something about the look in that nurse's eyes stayed with me. She wasn't confused. She wasn't guessing. She was certain. And she was scared for me. 20 minutes later, Ashley walked through the door carrying a travel mug with the logo of her real estate company on it. She rushed to my bedside and kissed my forehead, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're awake. I was so worried. The doctors don't know what caused this yet, but I brought you some of your favorite sports drink from home. The hospital stuff is terrible, and I know this helps with your electrolytes." She held the mug toward my lips. Steam rose in a gentle curl. It smelled like the orange flavor I'd grown used to, just like it always did. For 11 years, I'd never questioned anything Ashley gave me to eat or drink. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't trust my wife. "My throat's too sore right now," I said. "Maybe later." Something flickered across Ashley's face. It was there and gone in less than a second. A flash of something hard beneath the worry. Disappointment, maybe, or calculation. Then her warm smile returned, and she set the mug on the bedside table. "Of course, sweetheart. Whenever you're ready." She sat down beside me and held my hand. Her fingers were warm and soft, the hands of someone who worked with contracts and clients instead of concrete and steel. But I couldn't stop staring at that travel mug, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman holding my hand was not who I thought she was. 2 hours passed. 2 hours of lying in that hospital bed with my wife sitting beside me, holding my hand, telling me everything was going to be fine. 2 hours of staring at that travel mug on the bedside table and wondering if I was losing my mind for even considering what that nurse had said. Ashley talked about how scared Cody had been. She told me her mother couldn't stop crying and her father had aged 10 years in a single night. She said Danny was pacing the waiting room like a caged animal, calling my brother Shane to update him on my condition. She filled every silence with words, with reassurance, with what sounded like love. But I wasn't really listening anymore. I was watching her, studying her face in a way I never had before, looking for cracks in the mask, looking for something that would tell me the nurse was wrong. I didn't find what I was looking for, and that terrified me more than anything. When Nicole finally returned, she was carrying a folder. Her face was pale, and her jaw was set like she was preparing to deliver bad news to a family after an accident. She asked Ashley to step outside so she could change my IV and check some readings. Ashley hesitated. I saw her eyes dart to the travel mug, still sitting untouched on the table. "I'll just be a few minutes," Nicole said. "Hospital protocol. You can wait right outside the door." Ashley squeezed my hand and smiled. "I'll be right." "Back, honey." Then she walked out, and Nicole closed the door behind her. The moment we were alone, Nicole moved quickly. She set the folder on my bed and opened it, but she didn't show me what was inside. Not yet. First, she looked me straight in the eyes with the kind of intensity I'd seen in safety inspectors before they shut down an entire job site. "Mr. Kellard, your blood work came back. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, but I need you to stay calm. Can you do that for me?" I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "There are toxic levels of ethylene glycol in your system. That's the primary ingredient in antifreeze. Based on the concentration we found, this wasn't a one-time exposure. Someone has been poisoning you slowly and deliberately for months." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Antifreeze. Months. Poisoning. The words bounced around my skull but refused to form a coherent picture. "That's impossible," I said. "How would I have ingested antifreeze for months without knowing it?" Nicole's expression didn't waver. "Ethylene glycol is nearly tasteless. It has a slightly sweet quality that's easy to mask. You can hide it in juice, in sports drinks, in protein shakes, in anything someone prepares specifically for you. The sports drinks, the protein shakes, the special electrolyte powder Ashley mixed just for me every single day. The ones she insisted I finish, the ones she watched me drink with those loving, attentive eyes." "No," I whispered. "No, that can't be right. Not Ashley. She's been taking care of me. She's been trying to help me get better." Nicole pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. Her voice softened, but her eyes remained intense. "Mr. Kellard, I need to tell you something. When I was 16 years old, my stepfather showed the same symptoms you've been experiencing. My mother was incredibly attentive throughout his illness. She made him special drinks. She took him to every doctor appointment and answered questions on his behalf." She paused and took a breath. I could see the pain in her face, old wounds that had never fully healed. He died of what the doctors called organ failure. But I knew something was wrong. When I became a nurse and saw your chart, when I saw the way your wife hovered over every detail of your care, when I heard she was bringing you homemade drinks, I recognized the pattern immediately. The hospital has already contacted the police, Nicole continued. Based on your toxicology results, they're treating this as a criminal matter. If your wife realizes she's been caught, we don't know how she might react. You need to stay calm. You need to let her believe nothing has changed. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. 2 men in plain clothes entered. They introduced themselves as detectives and spoke in the kind of measured tones I'd heard from OSHA investigators after construction accidents. They told me they needed to test the contents of Ashley's travel mug. They needed my cooperation to build a case that would stick in court. Mr. Kellard, one of them said, based on the levels of ethylene glycol in your blood, we believe your wife has been poisoning you for at least 6 months. If you had continued consuming what she was giving you, our medical experts estimate you had 2 to 3 weeks to live, maybe less. 2 to 3 weeks. I would have been dead before New Year's Day. My son would have grown up without a father, and Ashley would have played the grieving widow at my funeral, collecting the insurance money and starting over with whoever she'd been planning this new life with. The detective asked if there was anything else that might be relevant. I thought about it. Then I remembered something that had seemed responsible at the time. 3 months ago, I said, she increased my life insurance policy from $400,000 to $800,000. Said it was smart planning with Cody getting older and college to think about. She handled all the paperwork herself. The detectives exchanged a look. One of them wrote something in his notebook. The conversation with Ashley that followed was recorded by the police. When I asked her directly if she'd been putting something in my drinks, she tried to perform outrage and hurt. But when I told her about the antifreeze in my blood, something cold and empty took over her face. You weren't supposed to collapse at my mother's house, she said quietly. You were supposed to go peacefully in your sleep sometime next week. I had it all planned out perfectly. She told me about the developer she'd been seeing, about wanting a fresh start, about how I belonged more to my job than to her. The insurance money was just part of it. She'd reduced our entire marriage to an inconvenience that needed to be eliminated. Ashley was charged with attempted murder. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. I made sure of that. I testified. I provided evidence. I watched her get exactly what she deserved. Some heroes wear hard hats and carry tools. Others wear scrubs and carry the courage to speak up when they recognize evil. Nicole saved my life with 5 words, and I made sure Ashley paid the price for trying to take it. Every morning when I wake up now, I think about those words that saved my life. Don't drink what Ashley brings. I never will again. And neither should you trust anyone who has too much control over what goes into your body. If this story opened your eyes, share it. You never know which man might need to hear it before it's too late.